my mother thought it was untenable for me to live there. And she said to my father, it's either she goes or I go. And my father said, well, son, I can live without you. And I said, okay, you will. And I was out the next day. And I just, went along. And I got to this point when 32 years later, when I recognized, okay, it makes sense to reconnect, and I'm strong enough and understanding enough within myself. And I got her number through my sister, thanks to Facebook, and called her up. And I thought I was being really grown up. But my first questions to her were the questions of a 16-year-old boy. Like, what did I do wrong? How bad could I have been? What did I do to ignite this in you? And she made a list. And actually the first statement was, well, you bucked the system. And I got zoom back to 16. Like, what does that mean? I didn't know what that meant when I was 16, buck as in bucking a horse. I didn't know what that meant then, and I still don't understand what that means now, Mother. Because I was kind of family-less, I'd been dating a woman for a year or so on and off at high school, and when I left school. And her mother, her name is Joy, and her mother got to a point and said, Warren, you're just not doing enough for yourself. Yes, you have a job, but really you're just pissing your money up against the wall, like literally Friday night, drink, get drunk. And I want better for my daughter. And I thought, oh, okay. So I joined the army. And it's not the girlfriend. She's not the reason. It's Joy, the mother. She's the reason, because she instilled a sense of, there's more potential in you. And if you look at army kids, many of them come from broken homes, or they come from a lineage, or they come from poverty. Empires need poor people so they can, have armies. So there was a gentleman who, as an army major, and I was a soldier, he was in a different unit, but in the same compound. I really looked up to him, and he was a runner, and I was a runner. He was Special Air Service Regiment, and that's where I wanted to go. And I really looked up to him. And then after I graduated from Royal Military College, I went into his unit. He became my commanding officer. And I thought, wow. And he's one of the reasons that I didn't really feel comfortable there. So after some time, my parents decided they want to try and reconnect with me. And they decided to do that through my commanding officer. My commanding officer said to me, Lieutenant Buttery, you should connect with your parents. I order you to contact your family. I said, with all due respect, sir, you can fuck off. Now, he didn't really appreciate that comment. It was an illegal order, so he couldn't charge me. Then he committed quite some time on getting back at me, including I was the mess officer, so we created games around a function, and he challenged me to the obstacle course that I created, and we were dress uniform, and he challenged me. He said, okay. So we run up this cargo net on these steps of this beautiful old Queenslander house, and he went to grab my feet because I was ahead of him, to pull me back to cheat. But the army shoes that I was wearing had steel taps on the toes and on the heels, and he cut his hand, sliced it right open. He went to hospital. I carried on the evening. We decided as young subalterns we'd go out and get drunk. And he came back with stitches in his hand and said, "Where's Buttery?" He wanted to challenge me again. I was already out in the town. I think I got 21 extras that time. Yeah, it means I had to serve at the front gate, no life, for 21 days. He later became my careers officer. And that's when my career really started to go down. So yeah, that was instrumental in me understanding the man that I wanted to be and not want to be. Looking at role models and recognize that these are not the kind of role models that I wanted to be. It brought me to the end of my army career, saying I don't want to be part of this any longer. There was a moment in southern Sudan, when it was southern Sudan, we were doing an emergency intervention. I was working for an international organization, relatively small. My role was to support their feeding program. Part of their feeding program was food as medicine, so capturing people right on death's door, and not just babies, but also adults. It's some incredible work. And in fact, the intervention that we had in this little town called Ajib was written about because it was so extraordinary. It was kind of work that's not been done since World War II, dealing with totally malnourished adults, because a lot of the children are already passed. Southern Sudan, there was nothing there. There was no buildings with glass. There was the war had been so significant, particularly in places that we were working. And the inter-ethnic group war, which is always really the undercurrent, if anyone knows about Sudan, it's not about politics so much. It's about what's happening on the local cattle rustling and people rustling and kidnapping of women for wives and all that kind of stuff is going on. So it's pretty horrific. And I had to get from town A to town B to help resupply, help support logistically a small team out there. A small team is one nurse, an Irish nurse. And I was talking to my colleagues, Sudanese military, Sudanese civil authorities about how do I get from one place to the other. I said, it'll only take you half a day. No, I think they said a couple of hours. And we'll give you a bicycle. The old Chinese model, what they call it, Pegasus, which doesn't have handles this way, have handles this way. It's kind of weird sort of thing. And big wheels. And they gave me a guide, and he was only a little fella, so he would have been about my height. Beautiful, really joyful man. And he took off on a bicycle, and I was trying to follow him in the heat of the Sudan desert. And we come across quite early boggy place because the flooding had gone on previously. And we couldn't ride the bikes. We had to carry the bikes, and with a backpack of maybe nearly 10 kilos. And by that time, I think we had been traveling for about 7 hours by then. And it was so hot. We started 5 o'clock in the morning. I was exhausted, and I sat down in this swamp. This guy had gone off ahead. I didn't know where he was. I sat down in the swamp, crying, bawling my eyes out. Really, I don't know where I am. There was elephant grass around me, so I couldn't stick my head up and see anything. And it smelled putrid. And I said, well, what am I going to do now? You're going to die here unless you get off your ass. So after 20 minutes or so of reorienting myself, letting loose some energy, I got off my ass and carried the bike and started plonking along in a direction. I had a compass. Didn't have a map, had a compass, and started heading off in that direction. And probably an hour had gone and he found me. And we reconnected, and it took us another 4 hours to get to where we want to go. And I finally got there exhausted and so appreciative. And the Irish nurse who was there, she'd been on her own for about a week. And I get there. She was very, very appreciative. And yeah, that was that one story. That was when I really looked at death. Yeah. I went to Sierra Leone for MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. And it kind of came as a charity mission. So when I was in Sudan, I was with a wonderful partner. Her name is Jane. And I went to Sudan, she went to Honduras. And in Honduras, she died. She died in a helicopter accident. Wow. She was a doctor, an Australian doctor. We met in Afghanistan. It was an incredible relationship. And the idea was I was going to do a short mission in Sudan and meet her in Honduras. And she was also working for MSF. And when in Sudan, I met a guy in the middle of the bush, and this American fellow. And we were sitting around at the end of the evening, swatting mosquitoes and drinking a whiskey. And he told me about how he had a former partner die in a helicopter accident. And I said, oh, what? What are the odds of that happening? Wow. They had been partnered for some time, and they had split up, and then this helicopter accident happened. And I've had helicopter accidents in my past, not myself, but when I was in the Australian Army, there was this very famous helicopter accident. Two Special Air Service helicopters collided, and 19 men died, and half of them were my friends. And so I had that happen. That was a big event in Australian military history. Anyway, I thought, oh my God, a helicopter accident. 2 days later, I got asked to come back to Lokachokio. Lokachokio is a town, northern Kenya, where the big aid effort, like big C-130 aircraft, were dropping pallets of food for the Sudan People's Liberation Army, really. They were dropping for the army. The army would take it and use it, and the communities would get some. But so I was called back to Lokachokio, and I landed on the airport, and this Irish guy, I was working for an Irish agency, who was the logistics chief, he pulled me aside at the back of the airfield and said, Warren, we've got some news about Jane. And whoa, what? Well, there's been a helicopter accident. And he got a chance to tell me that the accident happened maybe 4 or 5 days before, and because there was the big hurricane in Honduras, Hurricane Mitch, and are you ready to deal with this? My bottom dropped out of my life. Didn't know how to behave, and okay, but in the end, I just made the decision. The agency she was working with were generous enough. That was MSF. I was working not with MSF. I was working with somebody else, and they were generous, and they said, we'll fly her to Honduras, but they're still looking. The French Navy's out there and local authorities out there, and I said, no need. If the reports were a helicopter explosion over the ocean, they found bits of the helicopter and bits of the pilot. I said, I don't want to go there. I went to Melbourne to meet her parents. And for the first time in 15 years, I put their estranged relationship into the same room. And that was, for me, that was the most appropriate thing to do. I did, I had to go through 6 months of grieving in a country that I'd been away from for many years, didn't really know what to do. MSF said, look, I said to them, maybe, I want a job, get me out. And they said, well, okay, we'll send you to Sierra Leone. Cool. Go to Sierra Leone for MSF. And I got there, and it wasn't long. We were some of the first people to go back after the invasion of Freetown, which are horrific. If you know Sierra Leone War, it's about diamonds, and the hallmarks of that conflict were the use of machetes. Started with cutting off thumbs so they couldn't vote, arms, lips, ears, carving Revolutionary United Front in the people's chests, and horrific stuff. And MSF had set up a camp. It was the MSF amputee and war wounded camp. And everyone went in there. Kofi Annan and his wife, she went there, and what's her name? The former Mary Robinson, the former Irish president and later UN person, they'd come visit because we were basically capturing these people to come in off the jungle with these horrific wounds, gangrene and stuff that had been in the bush for a long, long time. MSF volunteer doctors would patch them up, maybe a bit of amputation here or there because they had to cut out the dead flesh. I was supporting the hospital and the camp. And you can imagine there are some stories around that camp, and so also a great one which I'll come to. There was this man. He was an older man. He probably would have been somewhere 50-ish, and I was sitting in the medical clinic in the little camp, and I just sat down next to him, and he started to tell me a story. He had no arms. They'd cut his lips off. And he started to tell me the story about how he was really lucky. The RUF had taken him out into the bush, and he'd witnessed his wife be raped and then murdered. And they'd already cut his arms. I think that's the timeline. And then at that moment, the ECOWAS soldiers, the Nigerian soldiers, came rushing through and cleared the camp, and he went running into the bush with his stump. He had his niece, a little 3-year-old, stump was pushed against his own hip to stop it bleeding, and his other little boy holding what was left of his arm. They'd cut it but not cut it through at this stage, and ran off into the jungle. So it took a little while for him to get out of the jungle, and he eventually did, and they operated with him, German surgeons, incredible people, them, using ketamine to knock them out as an anesthetic. And so I was dealing with the trauma of my dead partner, and I started bawling. I just wept like a child, and literally ran out of the clinic and ran home. And I took me maybe 4 or 5 days before I could muster the courage to go back into the camp. And I went back into the camp, and of course I found him and I sat down with him and said, thank you so much for your story, but why did you tell me this? He said, I felt you needed to cry. He felt my trauma. I wanted to share his experience to be able to allow me to let it go. That was a huge catharsis for me. and I continued working on the camp, and I really appreciated him. Yeah, so that was a big event.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me trying to tell that at Burning Man one year to a young, scantily dressed woman while we were on LSD was a really bad mistake. But